Right, guys, welcome to the session. I'm sure more people will be joining as we go along, but I'd like first of all take a moment to welcome our panel members. We've got Mr. or Professor Dr. Kevin Doughty. We've got Paul Bridges from Oyster. We've got Tim Mulrey from the TSA. And our own very own Grant Tiller. So welcome Phil, Kevin, Tim and Grant. So we'll get cracking on. Interesting subject again, which is future-proofing these services, how we're going to move forward over the coming years. We've got the spectre of the ageing population and the 2025 analog switch off hanging over us, and we've got to deal with it. And I think probably out of the two, the ageing population is the bigger threat personally. If you look at the numbers, and we'll be dealing with that a little bit later in our paying for the future session, but we have to, my opinion personally is that if we don't find a way to mitigate the impact of that ageing population over the next couple of decades, our health services and our social care services will be collapsed. Basically, they won't be able to handle it from a financial or a resource viewpoint. And my opinion, again my own, is that actually when you look at it and you look in depth at it, digital is really the only solution. There's no money trees available. There's no sudden influx of resources from some other planet. You know, the bottom line is, how do we deal? We've got to use what we've got, and I think digital is going to be the way forward. But let's talk about. I'm going to start the conversation by asking you a question, Mr. Mulrey. Something, you know, digital and transformation is something you're involved with at the TSA. I believe that we're certainly seeing at least the beginnings of a shift away from the traditional box-based approach to telecare. Are you guys at the TSA, are you seeing the same thing? What are your thoughts on it?
I think we're seeing some more conversations about how, for example, we can support people in the community and in their own homes. So potentially shifting away from that kind of relying on a hub and peripheral approach for some of the work we're doing. But I guess looking at the tenders that are kind of coming out at the moment, that what commissioners are asking us about, it's still fairly rooted in the traditional box approach, although there are conversations about how things, you know, Internet of Things can integrate and things like that, but it's still fairly rooted in the traditional, although there is an eye on how those traditional boxes move to digital, if you like. So at least they're becoming digital boxes, or certainly digitally capable boxes in the short term, you know, rather than going sort of full bang onto a completely IoT device, be that a watch or you know, some other device.
It's interesting. I mean, we had during the last session about standards and barriers, I made the point, an opinion that if we didn't get this change right, it could have a massive impact on our health and social services for years to come. As I said, the spectre, and you probably guys noticed those hands. That's the spectre of health of the ageing population dangling over us, and but it's a real issue, and I think we have an opportunity through the analog to digital change to make quite a sea change in what we're doing, a big change in what we're doing. And I believe that if we do stick to that old legacy mindset, that box-based mentality, we're going to find ourselves held in stasis for another 10-15 years. How do we actually avoid that? I mean, Kevin, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm more frustrated than even you are, because I'm older than the rest of you, and I also go back to 1996 when I published a paper called 3 Generations of Telecare, which progressed from box and button through continuous activity monitoring and then onto video monitoring. That was 25 years ago, and we've not moved on. We've not moved on because social care has been underfunded, and therefore all they've tried to do is give people support at that very base of Maslow's hierarchy. In other words, just give them an alarm system
food and shelter,
instead of moving up the steps and making more use of the information, the data, and actually more use of technology, not just digital technology and interventions that will actually replace the person needed currently, because we all know there won't be enough people to deliver traditional care. So we've got to do it differently, and we've got to do it better. Technology can do it, and the basis of it will be telecare or Internet of Things systems. So great frustration. I also see the digital transformation and the switching off of the analog network as a great opportunity that we would be stupid to throw away. So I like you, look forward to some big changes. In fact, an explosion of change, so that some of the boxes, the old button and boxes, are not just replaced, but thrown away and buried very deep.
Yeah, we keep getting them. The phrase that keeps coming to us is badges of infirmity. And it's quite interesting as to that whole approach, that ugly box with a big red button and that ugly pendant around people's necks, whether it's actually stopping and putting a barrier to the uptake of telecare. It makes a question I ask people is, how often or whenever have you seen an advert on TV for telecare? Well, you don't, because you're fundamentally advertising death. And if you get one of these, you're ready for the knackers yard. You know, perhaps if we had something more aspirational, if we convinced people that there was a solution that genuinely supported healthy aging, active aging, all of those things, it's the way forward. And again, digital is probably the only way. I mean, you're a product developer, Grant. You know, our own product developer, I'm very pleased to say. What do you believe are the key benefits to users, service providers of a software solution over a hardware box-based solution?
Probably agility, I think, is probably the most important thing. You know, yes, I work for Yorbl, and rightly or wrongly, I view Yorbl as a software company. You know, we wrap our devices up and deliver them to people. They're based on tablets and mobile phones, but at the end of the day, I look at that as purely the box that we ship our software in. And I think for me, having that mindset allows me to provide a product, provide a service, provide quality of care, and you know, really flip on a dime. If there's a new government initiative, if there's funding, if there's a change, if there's a customer need or requirement, because we've got a software product that we can update over the air, we can react on that and you know, provide that service really quickly. It's difficult to do that with a big red button that does nothing else. And you know, that's why I try and think that way. I think the biggest concern for me right now is, you know, yes, we've got an opportunity with the analog to digital phase and the big switch off. You know, 2025 is the end date. It is happening now, and you know, you, Peter, live in Salisbury and you're already digital.
Absolutely.
For me, there's a little alarm bell ringing in the background, because there's still a lot of people talking about, you know, D2A, a digital to analog converter, which allows you to get, you know, longer life out of the solution you've already got. Those solutions cost a lot of money to implement, and we could be spending that implementation money on putting a proper solution in place that's based on digital technology. So I have got that concern at the back of my head, and I am keen to, you know, talk about and extol the virtues of a proper digital solution rather than a band-aid, which I think the D2A technology is.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Phil, Oyster are a manufacturer, developer as well. Where do you see, how does Oyster see software and cloud playing in the future?
I'm going to start by saying I'm going to give you my personal opinion first, and then I'll do the Oyster one, because that's much more fun. and as you know, I do like to go down that route. So Kevin and I have had this conversation probably the first time about 15 years ago, when we talked about the holy grail of getting people supported no matter where they were. Let's no longer psychologically lock people in their own home by saying, here's your button, doesn't work if you go out, so stay where you are, please don't interact with the community, please be isolated, because that's where you're safe. And I think this dialogue sort of has moved on a little bit now. So, you know, I'm loving hearing this, because there's a degree of frustration that's there, and I think frustration is a great motivator for change. I think there's an awareness of the fact that we have to change, which is great as well. However, you know, at that point, the old alarm bells start ringing as someone, you know, who's been around this for a while and developed products and seen the dangers of, you know, how the market's been managed for the last decade or so. Is what I also don't want to see is that we just end up, and I've heard this already from some organisations, let's not just have a more expensive version of what we had before. That's more frustrating, does this exactly the same job, no benefit to the person at all beyond what they had before. It's just more expensive and harder to operate. And
how is that going to
over the air doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing, Phil, and that's identical but digital solution. We say it's going from one ugly box with a red button to a slightly less ugly red box with a red button that's digital. But the bottom line is, how does that identical solution, other than the transport mechanism, which is invisible to the user, how does it benefit them into the future? Then, from be interesting, Grant, how long, if you're a product developer, from the developing a box, now I'm familiar with a certain level, I'm sure lots of people have been familiar with a certain level of manufacturing process, and I'm sure Kevin and Tim will have something to say on this as well. If you develop a box, create a piece of hardware, you've got to go through the tooling for the manufacture of it, etc., etc., etc. Then, if I'm right in saying that physics dictates that there's only so much that box can do, no matter how much you upgrade the software in the box, it's the box that dictates and the hardware that dictates what it can and can't do. Do you see that as being? Do you guys see that as being a major problem, as saying, with box based?
Yeah, you know, I think if you've got physical buttons on a box, it's hard to give more functionality. And you know, yes, you can visit the premises and update it and allow it to, you know, perhaps talk over. You go back to the 80s, it was pulse dialing, talking DTMF, the tone dialing, touchtone phones, and that was all the latest and greatest then. You know, we're now still talking about DTMF. Even though they're switching off the analog services, how can I get a DTMF signal across IP? I've never heard something so ridiculous in my life. Why would you want to do that? But we're still talking about it. We're still entertaining the idea of supporting it. With software, you just don't have to do that. You know, if a device has got an IP address, no matter how that's got, you know, through Wi-Fi or broadband or a SIM card in the device, we can establish a secure connection to the back end, which is the ARC, and you know, we can start posting and receiving data to it. Because it's software based and it's updated over the air, if something changes, we change it over the air and we accommodate that change immediately. You just haven't got the barriers. What we need to focus on is making sure that it's done right, so that, you know, the solutions that companies build are robust and reliable and intuitive and easy to use and don't fail. And, you know, if there is a power cut, are things still going to work? You know, with the analog line with PSTN, it had its own power supply. So, you know, if the power to the building went out, you could still raise the alert in certain circumstances. That's all going to go. They're turning that power off the phone line. So we're talking about battery backups and SIM cards, and, you know, in big care homes where they've got VoIP systems, if that's turned off, how do we still raise the alert? So we're talking about backup and failover. There's a lot more to consider, but I think because we're, you know, certainly for us, we're a software company, we can be agile and we can accommodate those changes, I think, much more readily than the more traditional hardware solutions.
What do you think the TSA? What's the view of how you're? It seems that the common thread here and the common feel that is moving towards software and moving towards that agility is the way forward. We know that as an industry, it's been hugely traditionally box-based, and as it would have been, that was the technology that was available. What are the TSA doing, Tim, in terms of promoting this change? Not just with manufacturers and providers and developers, but also with service providers, commissioners. When they come to you for advice, are you advising them to look at the alternatives, to really open their eyes?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're probably not pushing. I think it's fair to say we're probably not pushing the boundaries as far as you would like us to push them, but we are talking to our commissioners and service providers about how they can future-proof their service. So it might be that they're starting to look, for example, to cloud-based platforms as opposed to on-premise platforms, for example. We're talking to them about ensuring openness and interoperability between the devices. We've got to understand, I think, that if we were all in a greenfield scenario where we were kind of starting from scratch, then absolutely we wouldn't even dream of kind of DTMF tones and whatever. But the reality is there's a lot of stuff out there in the ground that can't be shifted overnight, and we're encouraging people to do that shifting, but it costs money and and all that sort of stuff. So we're having to take a bit of a hybrid approach, and I think there is still a marketplace for a box in the premises, but that box in the premises might be for more sort of high-end individuals who are maybe confined to their home, who maybe have got a number of peripherals it's linked to that needs guaranteed kind of power and all that sort of stuff, whereas the default setting might be actually a kind of a pendant or a watch or some kind of thing on the go at this end. So it's a kind of a progression of need, if you like, from one end to the other, and the right thing to do is look at what outcomes do you want to achieve for that individual, not what box it is and all that sort of stuff that will follow. So that's what we're trying to encourage. We don't want any kind of issues with service providers moving platforms from one to another, or from moving devices or peripherals from one to another. We want to encourage openness, interoperability, and the right solution, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, interoperability, as we know from the last TSA conference, was a big drive. I think I've had conversations, easier said than done, but I think we're all fighting for that to happen. Kevin, what's your view on what do you think's blocking this? What do you think it's being blocked? Do you think there is something or somebody or whatever it is that's stymieing this development and this path forward? I understand what Tim is saying, particularly around budget, and we're going to be talking about budget and how to pay for the future and how to take a new view of how to do that in a later session, and because it's a relevant question, and I do differ with the idea of asking people to get rid of old boxes and bring in new technology. I think everybody should get rid of old boxes and bring in new technology, but then I work for Yorbl, go figure. What do you think? What do you think?
I think you've all summarized it in a way, but perhaps you've missed this disruptive nature and the impact that has on people's cultural and psychological, the basis of provision by a local authority. They've made a massive investment. A typical unitary authority will have out there £10 million worth of boxes and buttons. And what we're really saying to them, abandon this instantly and move over to something more flexible, so that in the future, instead of just changing the box, you'll change, if you like, the contents of the box. But they look at other areas and they see, what do Apple do? What's the big newie in an Apple phone 12 compared to an iPhone 11 or whatever? And it's quite small. And while you know that the iPhone 6 might still work rather well, but because of the nature of people wanting the latest and wanting the best, they will upgrade. Same with the motor car. Why should anyone change a motor car? You can repair it for 10, 20 years and it still works. The latest cars don't do that much more. And yet we know that we can transform things digitally to do more. So it's that perception of invest in the future because it will save that hasn't been shown. And that's the bigger digital transformation for a whole industry. So I think the social care industry needs to understand the importance ultimately of prediction and then prevention using technology. And that's not going to be digital technology, incidentally. The digital bit will be the algorithms and the and machine learning and artificial intelligence and the dashboards. But the intervention will be technology based. So this is probably assistive devices, things that will slow down your decline and intervene so that you don't have to move into a care home. You don't need domiciliary care. And that could be the social robot, for example. And that's the complete transformation. But it starts with digital. Digital gives you the information informs the assessment, and that's the deficit. The assessments are poor because assessment needs understanding the individual and the things that they need, whether it's access to the device, how to learn, how to use a digital device. But ultimately, the assessor needs to know all those interventions. And I'm afraid there's no system in the UK that can do that. And that's the deficit. And therefore, why will social care put out a tender that allows for all those changes if they know that the industry hasn't caught up on the interventions? So
I think to your point as well, Kevin, we also see, and something we talk about with customers and prospects on a daily basis, is there's a different expectation. You know, the older generation are far more tech savvy than they used to be. There's a better understanding of, you know, what could be brought to the party. You know, they go to their Skybox and they can consume services. Why not be able to do that with everything else in their life? And you know, why not be able to stay in their own home for a few years longer?
Absolutely, and they
God
don't.
God knows if we can help with that, then we can reduce the cost of that care.
Yes.
You know, help them stay in their own homes and provide these services there.
Independence.
What seems to be coming away from that, from your comments, Kevin, and your follow-up, Grant, and I'd like very quickly your thoughts on this in a moment, Philip, is that if people don't take that leap of faith, look at how they can change things now, how they can go for the true digital now, what are the different ways of funding, and as I said before, there are different ways, and we'll look at those later. It's going to cost them a lot more financially in the long run, point A, and point B, it's going to stop people getting access to the services they want, they need, and that will enable them to live healthier and happier lives, stay out of homes and hospitals longer, and stave off that spectre of the aging society. I think that's clear. I think so. Yeah, I think the takeaway for our delegates, one of the takeaways from this session is be brave. Go out there and have a look. Take time to take the look at something different. Look at different ways of funding it. Look at how you can get into that, get that first real step on that ladder. What's your thoughts and Oyster's thoughts on that, Phil?
So I think it's great. I think we've remodeled the business quite firmly in the last year to look more at an outcomes-based model. So we're no longer building technologies and looking for a problem to fix. We're coming from the end of actually we're really changing how we operate, because I think what's becoming clear going forward is, you know, I'm getting older. You know, I want to grow old disgracefully. Frankly, I want to cause an absolute problem for my kids because, frankly, they've caused an absolute problem for me. So, and I want to continue living in my own home. I want to go out, you know, feet first. Absolutely. In all of those models and everything that we're talking about, the thing is that the person part of it benefits from this move if we get it right, but only if we get it right. So it's got to be about, you know, Hypertension's costing 2 billion. Well, yeah, exercise is the best cure to that. Let's encourage people. Let's gamify going out. Let's make being elderly and disruptive in the community a great thing to do. Let's find, coffee shops that say between 11 and 12, it don't matter if you're rushing to get to your meeting. There's a nice queue of elderly people who want to interact with each other that are taking over, and they're taking over the town.
I like
great.
That.
Let's move the agenda away from how it has been, because we can. We got an ideal opportunity. We got a couple of years to actually say, no, actually, game over. We want to restart. Let's hit the reset button. And I don't care who wins. Actually, I don't care which organisation wins, as long as the people win. That's it, because I'm going to be one of them.
Well, that's it. If the people win, we'll win.
Yeah.
For precisely that reason,
Community wins. Yeah. I mean, look at the concessionary bus pass. I love the concessionary bus pass. It's been funded forever because it saves government money. That's the only reason. If you give people a reason to go out, make it easy for them, make it accessible, the actual upshot of that is actually people live a better life, less isolation, better outcome in terms of physical activity. These are not rocket science things. We've just, hey, I'm sure there's enough people on this call that have known me for more than 10 years, wanging on about breaking down the four walls. Hey, let's do it now. Let's just get going.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's that old saying I've mentioned several times already today, that in IT, you didn't get sacked for buying Cisco, you didn't get sacked for buying IBM, and in telecare, you didn't get sacked for buying A, B or C. And the bottom line is, it's that mentality that's holding everything in place and holding it down, and it's encouraged very heavily by A, B or C. And I think the bottom line is, just take the time, take a breath, take the time to look at what the future could hold, and look at how you could fund it and how you could benefit the people you serve, and therefore save money, increase efficiency. There's just so much to be gained by this, and it's you and I just rant about this because it's our soapbox, and long may it say so. Listen, I'm going to wrap up, guys. Hugely enjoyable, and thank you so much for your input to this, and I hope everybody listening got something out of it. And it's, again, second time today, that takeaway: be brave, look at something new, look at something different. So we're popping off now. Everybody's going to have some lunch, I hope, and get a cup of tea or whatever else it is you have at lunchtime. We'll be back with data, the session which leads on very nicely from this session at 10 past 1. See you again there at Kevin. We've got some very interesting panelists on that session. Dr. Nadia Smith from the National Physical Laboratory. She's heavily involved with AI and data. Professor Roy Sambach, who a lot of people already know. Roy's healthy aging guru and been involved in telecare for a long time. Aaron Edwards, he's from Telecare Cardiff, so on the sharp end of this, and again yourself, Kevin. So look forward, have a great lunch, and we'll see you at what is it, 10 past 1. Look forward to it. Bye bye.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Right.